Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. Today, I'm thrilled to have David Rice join me. David is a versatile professional with an eclectic background, including stints in hospitality, journalism, and content marketing. In this heartfelt conversation, David shares his journey from facing job layoffs during the 2007 economic downturn to finding his niche in the DEI space to his current role as senior editor for People Managing People. Together, we look into the importance of pursuing passions outside of work and how young people can navigate common misconceptions about career fulfillment. David opens up about the impact of getting laid off, the mental and emotional struggles that ensued, and how a retreat helped him find balance and happiness through self care. Throughout this episode, we explore the significance of timing and readiness in personal growth, the need for self awareness and adaptability, and the relentless journey to self improvement. David also shares intriguing anecdotes from his time as a limo driver and his thoughts on the ever evolving landscape of technology and its implications on society. Enjoy the conversation, and as always, like, subscribe, comment, share, and let me know what you think. David, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you because now you're on the other side of this. Usually you put me in these situations where I have to create content, which I do with pleasure, of course, or do some kind of interviews or some kind of talk. So now I'm excited to have you on the other side because also I think it's always fun to be in the other seat and gives you an opportunity to kind of share your story, which I think is really, really interesting. And I want my audience to hear. And we're all about shifts, and you've gone through quite a few of them. So before we get started, tell my audience why they should stick around for the next 30 to 45 minutes that we're going to be doing this, who you are, what you're doing, how you got to where you are today talking to me.
Yeah, it's been a road to get to where I am. I started working at a young age. I was working in like hospitality for a long time. When I had a job a few years ago where everybody kind of laughed because they said that I've had all the jobs in the world, but it's kind of true. I've worked in car lots or garages. I've worked in hospitality. I've been a golf caddy. I've been I've washed cars for a living. I've done like trade work for a little while, like general labor, even all the way up to plumbing. And then I got my journalism career started when came out of school. I got a degree in journalism at probably the worst time that you could get that degree. I'm an older millennial, so I
Yeah.
out of school in 2007 in December, and at
Hmm.
that year the economy went in the toilet,
Oh
and
yeah, 2008. Yeah.
yeah, and then all the publications fired all their journalists, and it became an incredibly saturated talent space. But I made it work for several years. I mean, I always had second jobs where I was like bartending or waiting tables or something, but eventually, I was just a journalist for about 6, 7 years, and then I got laid off like a lot of other people. I started driving limos for a bit because I had a friend who did that, and he owned a business, and he said, "Well, I want you to come help." So I did that for a while. Was really unhappy doing that, and decided I had to find a way into marketing, and so the going into content marketing got me into the higher ed space for a while, and it was there I started to learn about all these different industries. It turns out that people still needed journalists' skills, which was nice to find out and to develop a career around. And so I was writing about like healthcare analytics for a long time and healthcare information systems. And then I started a podcast at that job because I was really interested in the podcasting format. And then that led me to learning about HR for the first time. And it was only a little while later after I started an HR kind of semi-focused podcast for that company um, that I got a call from an events company that wanted me to come and be the editor of their HR-focused website and really become an HR I don't want to, I hate saying HR expert. I call myself an observer of HR because I've never actually worked in HR. But I'm a keen observer of it. And I've hosted a lot. I started hosting a lot of events and webinars and podcasts and all these different things and writing all this content about HR. And then that took me into the DEI space for a couple of years. Got worked for like essentially a consultancy that works with some really major companies, and basically looking at their DEI efforts, sort of stacking them up against their competition. We did that. I did that for a couple of years, like ran their events, and I was the managing editor for their websites. And the, as you know, DEI space is in an awkward moment where it's the subject of a lot of ire, a lot of eh, just I don't know how to say it. Like I don't want it's people are hating on it. That's what I'd say. And we had a they had a different vision for where the business would go, and so we decided to part ways. And I ended up here, where I am now, which is I'm the senior editor of People Managing People, which Elena is the as an editorial advisory board member on, and it's focused on all things HR, really. But we really focus in on tools and what sort of are the tools that are helping people win at work, because our goal is to help people win at work. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's been a roundabout journey to get here, but
Yeah,
lots of shifts in there.
definitely. Why journalism?
I wasn't good at math, and I was not, as a kid, I just couldn't really get into science that much. I wasn't that interested in, like, chemistry and all that. It was fine. I did the classes, I passed, but I just wasn't I was never thinking to myself, "This is what I wanna do with my life." I didn't see myself as a scientist in any way. I actually didn't know what I wanted to do when I came out of school. Like, a little interesting side note, I had all the paperwork filled out to join the army,
Hmm.
and my birthday is September 13th, and on September 11th, 2001 was 2 days before my 18th birthday, so I didn't turn the paperwork in.
Oh my gosh,
As
that would
my
have been
mom
a
used
big
to told me
decision.
son. She was like, "I was
Yeah.
crash right now." So
Wow. You
so,
know, it's amazing how it just how life just shifts, you know? Like it's amazing how so many things, like as you were speaking, and just like the different journeys that you had, because I'm sure it's looking back, you're like, oh yeah, like that was an interesting thing, but going through it, you're like, oh crap, like this sucks. Or like, right? Like, what am I gonna do?
yeah. I mean, I really had no idea coming out of school, like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, it was senior year, and I'm looking at it going, like, I don't know. I don't have any desire of going
Mm,
in any direction. And it wasn't actually until so I decided to go to junior college because I was like, well, hopefully somebody here could help me find something that doesn't stink, you know?
yeah.
And so it ended up being a professor that I had in a creative writing class, and he said, "I don't know what you're gonna do with your life, but it needs to be something with this.
Mm,
You need to write for a living." And I was like, "Okay, I where do I how do I even chart that path?" Like, I don't even know what that looks like. And so they got me in with a counselor who just showed me a university in the state that I was in Florida at the time, and he said, "The University of South Florida has the best journalism program, and I think that's probably your best path forward." And, I had a buddy who was going to school there, so I thought, "Well, I can go." He was like one of my best friends. I thought, "Well, I can go be near him, and we can." When I was a kid, it kind of fit with what the rest of my life was, because when I was a kid, I was so sports obsessed. And my grandparents and my parents used to always tell me that I needed to be a broadcaster, because at like age 7, I could tell you the entire Buffalo Bills lineup. Like I was such a sports nerd like that. And they're like, "You need to go be on TV."
yeah.
I never thought I could never picture myself. I used to hate speaking in front of people. I used to get so nervous. And then so I couldn't picture myself on TV, but when he said being a sports writer, I thought, "Well, yeah, I know I think I could do that." So
Yeah.
that's where the journalism background came from.
Nice. And so, before we move on, though, I'm really interested. Worst limo story. Do you have one?
Oh, well, is this I don't know if this is safe for this podcast.
Okay, give me like a. It's everything is safe for this podcast. This is a pretty. We don't judge.
Um,
My audience doesn't judge.
oh, no, I mean, I've had people, do the deed, so to speak, back
Yeah.
there. I've had to clean up someone's, drug residue. I'll just leave
Oh
it.
no. That's. I mean, that's like you would expect that to happen. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, it's
yeah,
part and parcel of the business. I
yeah.
will tell you a cool story. Once I we worked the company I worked for, the city of Tampa hosted the like Indian Film Awards, like the Bollywood Film Awards. It's like their version of the Oscars, right? And I got assigned to drive this actress who was like apparently like the Indian Angelina Jolie is how it was described to me.
Yeah.
And it was incredible, like, the amount of people that would follow us or, like, they would spot her out in public, and we'd have to, like, rush her out of there and get it
It's like
was
a
crazy.
movie.
It was like I was literally driving Angelina Jolie or something. I felt like, she was so famous.
Wow.
So
That's
that was
cool.
kinda cool. And I remember with the night of the awards show, someone opened the door to let her out, and I looked back, and it was Kevin Spacey that was letting her out of the car.
Oh, very cool. That's
This
a
is back
cool
when, like, House
story.
of Cards was a big deal, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, at least that was the fun experience through that crappy experience, I guess, of driving
Yeah,
limos.
yeah. I mean, the getting home at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning and, being driving people to the airport at all hours of the day, and it was all
Yeah.
that stuff, I don't miss it all.
Yeah, I can imagine. Out of all the changes you've gone through, what has been the one that was the hardest, or like you know what I mean? Like, was there the hardest change? Um, like, did you get
Um,
better at it? Was it all hard? Can you recall?
yeah, I mean, I think the shift into the content marketing world because you had to view it through a different lens than you do journalism because it's not strictly journalism. And I started to have to learn about things that I didn't even know existed before I got the job. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
what informatics was, for example. Like, no, I never heard the term. What is informatics? What does it even mean? And so not only have to learn about it, but like immerse myself in that world and talk to experts and become knowledgeable to the point that I could start a podcast, that I could go to university professors and talk about the projects that they were working on with their students. And I remember the first episode of the podcast was about this platform that they had created, essentially that it's very non-invasive, but it kind of allows family members to check on their very senior parents without bothering them, essentially, right?
Hmm.
And it was interesting, but it was like to get to that point where I could do something like that and tell that story, I had to tell a lot of stories that were just like very foundational knowledge for me. And that was interesting. But it showed me again that like I can write about anything if given enough time. And I knew that because like when I was a journalist, I worked freelance for a long time. So I couldn't just make a living writing about sports. Every kid coming out of college will write about sports for free. So you got to be willing to write about arts and culture and business and local politics and whatever it is that's going to be that day,
Mhm.
and so I knew I had that flexibility, that adaptability, and that's a skill that's really served me well over the years. It's like being able to look at different things. And then when they said, do you want to do a we would like to see you do a podcast about HR. I said, well, I don't know anything about HR. And they said, well, you didn't know anything about healthcare analytics 2 years ago. So what's the difference? And I was like, that's a fair point.
I can learn. How much time do I have?
Yeah, I'm like, well, I'm not getting overtime here, so
Yeah.
let's just be clear. Like we gotta pace this out responsibly.
What have you learned about yourself throughout all these different changes?
Professionally or personally or both, or
Both.
well, professionally, that I'm very adaptable. I could do a lot of different things. I've mentioned all the jobs that I've had. Working in media all these years, you kind of find yourself being asked to do all these kind of different things that aren't actually media work when you really think about it. But I've been able to do it, and that skill has served me well. And I think why I'm not nervous about myself personally when I think about like where some things are going with like AI. Some people really do get nervous about this, and with good reason. I think for some people, but for me personally, I kind of just feel like I'll shift to the next thing. I don't know what it is. So I've done it before and I'll do it again. Like there's going to be some demand for skills that I have because I've developed so many different skills over the years that I'll probably be fine. I don't know what
Mm,
it's like. I don't know how fine, but I'll probably be fine. Um, Personally, I've learned that this work isn't going to scratch my creative itch. Uh, it's just what I do for a living, but no matter what I do with it, it isn't going to be the thing that makes me feel like I've exercised my creativity in the best way. So I've got to stop trying to make it my creative outlet.
Mm,
I can use my creativity in my work, but I have to accept that like I'll never probably be satisfied with that as my creative outlet. And so I'm always going to have to paint or write or play music or build things with my hands, something in my free time that services that need. Um,
mm,
that's something I've kind of arrived at in the last year or so because I spent a lot of time trying to make this job my my work, my creative outlet, and it never quite felt like it was like it was being the need was being met. And yeah, I've just figured out that it's going to have to be something else.
mm. That's a very important point because I think in the world of social media where it seems like everybody's just doing what they love and it's all like passion and all of that. But to your point, sometimes it's just finding that I don't know what it's called, like a system that works for you, right? Like having that, like, listen, sometimes you work and you might enjoy it and that's good, but it's not going to satisfy. It's very rare, and I'm in career development space. I rarely speak to somebody who's like, my job just ticks all my boxes for me. My career is just the best thing that ever happened to me. And this is coming from somebody who loves like I love what I do, and it doesn't scratch everything. I have to find outlets like podcasting,
Yeah,
for example. So it's a very important point, I think, for especially young people to hear, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions between reality and sure, it's for some people it might be the truth, but it's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. And there's other ways to fulfill that
yeah.
passion, that itch.
I think I've always said like everyone needs to have a passion, and it doesn't need to show up on your LinkedIn. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like it's just, but everybody needs to have something that they do, and they don't care whether or not it makes them any money, or whether it gets them a better house or further status in life. It doesn't need to be a part of that picture. It just needs to be something that you're passionate about, and it makes you feel good, and it gives you a sense of identity. Because the biggest thing that I think a lot of us grapple with a lot of the time, and I know I've in the last few years I've been wrestling with this. Your work is not who you are. It's just what you do so that who you are can live in a space that has lights and electricity, like running water. And that's
mhm,
really all You're just using it to keep the lights on, but it's not if it's all that you are and all if it becomes such a part of your identity that you can't separate from it, in the long term, you will struggle a great deal with pieces, things around your mental health, your happiness, your relationships with people outside of work. All of that is going to become strained because you can't separate this identity from your reality, really. Your family, your friends, your community around you, that's your reality. That's the things that you need to come back to and connect with to stay grounded, to remember who you are as a person, what's important to you, how you view the world and how you behave essentially. All
mm.
of that, it matters a great deal, and I think it's more important than and you look at my LinkedIn, I probably come off as fairly passionate about what I do, but at the end of the day and I am. I went during those hours where I'm working on it, I'm very ingrained, I'm, like, caught up in it, and I want to be successful, and I pursue all my goals with a lot of fervor, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I'm a huge basketball fan. I love soccer. I like doing this. I like, being out in my garden. You got to have other things where you can go, this is me. This is my time. I'm not giving this to anybody for any amount of money.
Mm.
Um,
You mentioned it's just really in the last year that you kind of come to that. What has been the driver to be like, maybe I need to look at this differently?
so I was about a year ago. I got laid off, or well, I laid off from a job that DEI company they mentioned, and I was very invested in that job because it identified with something that I personally believed in. And so I had really poured myself into it to such an extreme that I had sort of lost my way with my personal, well, I would say like my mental health and my personal connection to things that mattered to me. Um, and I started to go down this path where about 3 months before that, I had gone to this breathwork event and I had this like moment of clarity. Really, like, where I came out of it and I just realized that it was starting to consume me. Like, I wasn't even bringing myself into my relationship, right, with my girlfriend. I wasn't. being the best pet owner now. Like I was getting lazy on that front. I was getting lazy on doing some of my around like I'm a big DIY person. I'm always wherever I live, I'm always tearing it apart and putting it back together again and make it better or whatever. I'm even falling asleep on that now. And it's like you go down the list of like the things that make me go, and I'm not doing them now. I'm so involved in this and so like it's all encompassing. And after I got laid off, I went and I did this like retreat. It was a full weekend. It was with sort of a spiritual retreat kind of thing, like a yoga type thing. And I'd always viewed yoga as more of an exercise than anything. People always talk about that spiritual side of it. I'd never really experienced that before. What I did in this thing, it kind of taught you these different practices. And when I came out of that, I had some time off because I was looking for a new job, and I got to like pour into that more. And what I realized was if I can build habits, like the right practices into my day, I can stay connected with where I was at that time because even though I was not working, I was the happiest I'd been in a long time. And I felt more balanced. I felt more in tune with the things that I wanted and the things that make me me. And that was a huge shift. Like that's when I say the last year, it's been finding my way back into the working world, but also maintaining those practices and maintaining those habits so that I can continue to be at my best. Because I'm at my best when I do all those things and then I come to work, not when I work and I try to make some time for those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a profound kind of realization that you had. And as you're listening, I'm just like, I wonder, like, how do you package that? And like, because part of me is like, well, do you have to be ready for it? Like, is it that you just have to be ready? Because it's like we know this, right? And I know this, and I've been in personal development, like a fan of it for a long time. But it's like, well, like, what's your thought? Is it like, does one have to be ready for it? Or is there can you package it in a way that's like, hey, here's a tool and thing that you can do to get to where I am, like with not about you, but, just specifically, like, here's what helped me with that clarity. Or do you think it's just like time and circumstances?
Yeah, I think it is in some ways. I think it's where you are in your life and the type of person that you are. But I think people only hear what they're ready to hear. Like we
Yeah.
all see these. I've been watching, wellness content for years. I've been going to yoga classes and all these different things, right? And for years I heard it, but I didn't listen. Like I didn't listen to it. You know what I mean? Like the difference. Like it wasn't really. It's like it almost wasn't about me. I had control of those things, and I didn't need to think of it in that way. And it's only once you start to experience something where you have that moment of clarity where like you realize that it's taken me over, that I can't separate from it, that I'm up at 11:30 having started working at 8 a.m. that morning and I'm still working. And what am I doing? I'm doing this on my Friday night. I'm getting calls and putting down my dinner and letting my dinner burn on the stove because I'd run to take this call with a client or something. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm. What am I doing? This is coming at a cost to me now.
Mm-hmm.
Starts to have that. You're going to have a moment at some point where it hits you like a brick that you've got to do something differently. You've got to control it in a different way. But I think especially when you're young and you're hungry and you want to do well, you want to be successful, you want to get out on your own and buy a house and get married and do all the things that we are taught, that you're supposed to do essentially, or you want to climb the corporate ladder. You can sometimes you'll join an organization and you'll see that ladder and you'll see how you could ascend it and you sort of become obsessed with it. You're probably when you're in those spaces, it's hard to remind yourself that, oh yeah, I gotta go throw the football around with my friends because it's just something I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because that doesn't serve your end goal. And if you're like a lot of us get very like we're just so focused, like our focus becomes so narrow on this thing that can define our success that you can't see outside the focus. Everything else just becomes a blur.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think you're right. It's like you have to be, you can listen, or you can hear things, but do you actually listen? And you have
Yeah.
to, you have to feel that difference. How has it been this last year? Like what has been the most significant impact for you after you've implemented that?
You know what's interesting? I was thinking about this the other day, and it's realizing a lot of things about yourself is what creating that space where you are more in tune with yourself and the things that make you tick. You become more self-aware. And one of the things I've realized is like at times in the work setting, for example, my communication style maybe wasn't the right in a certain setting. And so I've caught myself doing it since I've, transitioned into a different thing and gone, what's another way I could have said that? Or like, what's another way I could have approached the situation? There's this, uh, I don't know if you've ever read that book, Nonviolent Communication. He talks about it. Oh, it's a good book. Um, the guy that wrote that, he talks about that a little bit about uh, when you say the word responsibility, we always think of it like it's a burden, but actually, like responsibility means response able. And I had
Mm.
that spiritual retreat that I went to, that he talks about this as well. It's like you have the ability to respond to anything however you want. It's a choice. And I had heard somebody else say, and I don't know where this one came from, but they said your first response to something, your first reaction to something is how you were raised. So, like, whatever it is, it's like your reaction to someone being in confrontation towards you, you're going to probably handle that how you saw the people that you took influence from as a child.
Hmm.
You'll handle it in a very similar way to how they might. Your second response or your second reaction is a choice. You can choose to respond to that however you want. And I think about those things and kind of some of the things that I've had to respond to and then try to communicate what I'm thinking, feeling, where or how my expertise might plug into something. And because I've been more in touch with like who I am as a person and not lost in this sort of cloud of I'm this title, essentially. I'm this job that I've taken on. I've been able to do it in a way that's healthier and a little bit more reflective of me as a person. And that's, I think, important for everybody because you'll feel much more comfortable in whatever you do, whatever you say. There's a lot of imposter syndrome going around. I used to suffer from that all the time. I don't now because I'm like, well, I was just me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I maybe me wasn't what you needed, but that's what you're gonna get, and I'm comfortable with that. I don't have to feel like I have to explain that. I feel like that will explain itself essentially, and that's a good feeling. It feels like it's okay to be you. Just relax and bring the value that you have to bring and let other people do their thing. You're surrounded by talented people, most likely within your organization, wherever you are. You're very likely surrounded by people who have great insights, opinions, their own data to work off of, or whatever. Eh, Just somebody asked me on the podcast, what's one thing you wish you could tell your younger self? I'm like, don't talk in a meeting if you don't have anything to say. Because when you're young, you think like, oh, you got to make your presence felt. No, you don't.
Hmm.
Add value when you have value to add, and then the rest of the time, sit back and learn. Take notes, be present.
Yeah. I
Oh,
love that. As you're speaking, I'm sitting here and just like thinking of like how it just this personal development journey just never ends, and there's like different layers to it because I spent quite a bit of time and on personal development, but as you're speaking, I was like, I'm not even there yet. Like I'm not, and I'm just like, and I'm sure like people are listening, like it's a journey and we're all like on their own journeys, but it's amazing when the time comes and you're like go through it and then you see such an impact and it sounds like it's been a phenomenal impact, and just getting rid of imposter syndrome alone is like a huge one for so many people. I
yeah,
feel like we're all like continuously like in imposter syndrome mode, so it's kudos to you really.
thanks. No, and it's funny because, like, when you're younger, you don't really think about like what it's like. You don't really think of it in terms of like, what do I want to do to be the best version of myself, or like how. 25-year-old David never asked, "What's the optimal version of 25-year-old me look like?" I am it. That's it.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm the
when you're
best thing
25,
there is.
yeah, when you're 25, that's how you think, And now I'm like 40, and I'm like, all right, what is the ideal 40 David? What's he like? And what does he want to do? And how does he pursue his goals? And I think it never ends because I'm going to be asking myself, what's the ideal 60-year-old David like one day? Like, what kind of physical condition do I want to be in? What kind of goals have I achieved? Did I ever do that hike that I wanted to do up in the Northeast? Did I ever do a little adventure in Spain that I wanted to do, or whatever it was?
Yeah.
Like, I check these boxes, and if not, like, well, 60 is not too late. Can I do it now? That kind of thing. And I think of, like, I do stuff like that all the time now, where I'm like, when I was in my early 20s, I was like, oh, well, you know what would be a cool job one day is I'd like to get into like coaching soccer. And then I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, well, you're only 40. Like, people coach soccer when they're 70. Why can't I like get into it now?
Yeah.
Like,
Why
there's no,
not?
yeah, and it'll be a great job. It'll help you connect with young people, which is always worthwhile.
Yeah.
You know, like, you don't think that when you're young because it's you people are trying to connect with. you know, but like, it's worthwhile. They teach you things that you didn't know,
Yeah.
give you a different point of view. So I think to myself, like, it's just never too late.
Yeah. Yeah, and young people keep you young and keep you on your toes and keep you humble.
Yeah,
You
dude,
know?
'cause some of the skills that they have, I'm like, I didn't do that until I
I
was
know.
45.
I know. I'm
But
really like it's very humbling to be around like 25 to 30-year-olds these days. I'm like, "You doing what?" Like, I
you
feel
know,
behind.
I know, I know. I am. One of the things that happened though is like was the whole hustle culture thing. I was like, I don't think this is a good long term. And a lot of folks like really that I know that are like in that like 30 to 35 age range, they like almost now have convinced themselves that like they have to monetize everything that they do. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, no, you don't. Why? If you've got enough money to pay your bills and feed yourself, do you, what you can cut it there. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And go do something for fun. Like, at some point, your life has to be worth living.
Yeah.
Because if you're just working all the time, that's not a life worth living. In my opinion, anyways, that's not a life worth living.
Mm. If you were to meet a version of yourself who was working those, 12, 14-hour days, burn dinner on the stove, or if somebody who's in that situation now, but maybe they don't recognize, like, what would be the advice? Like, what would be the tip or little nugget that you would tell them that they could maybe recognize in that moment, if anything?
Well, I would just ask them, what was the last thing that made you smile at work?
Mm,
Like, really genuinely feel something good. Because when you're in like the mode where I was, not much. Not much does. I think I had more fun working as a dishwasher in a chain restaurant than I did at that job, and I was making a lot more money than I ever made as a dishwasher, and I
yeah.
was, a much more recognizable face. I mean, people are coming up to you like like you're successful. That's how they approach you, and I had more fun working as a dishwasher.
Mm,
If I could meet the version of me that was a dishwasher, I would just say, in a weird way, what you learn here and what the lessons that you take from this are going to be some of the most important ones in your entire career. Even though you're just sitting there washing dishes and you think, God, this job's boring. I hate it. That's
mhm.
disgusting. But some of the lessons the character building that happens through that is actually the stuff that you'll never forget, and that I'll be using it in the workplace when I'm 60.
I love that. What would you say to a fresh graduate who just got a journalism degree? What would your advice be?
Well, first, let me start by saying I'm sorry. Uh, but I take it that you don't listen to advice very well, so because I know for a fact people told you not to do this.
But here we are, so
But here we are. So Be ready for a lot of change forever. It's always going to keep changing, but remember that like you did this because you're a storyteller. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to tell stories. No, the robot will help and it's going to tell stories, but your perspective, your persona, your humanity, that's what's going to make you valuable forever. So never let go of that above all else. Like fiercely hang on to that and inject it into everything you do. Because the one thing that the technology can never do is be you. So that has to pour through in everything that you do. It's going to be the only way that this job exists in 30 years because it just won't be necessary.
Mm,
Completely honest. If you look at the rate that it's going now, I mean, it won't be necessary probably in 15 years. No, never mind 30. When you're 50, what are you going to do? What's going to happen is your career is going to continue to evolve, but there will always be a place throughout human history. There has always been a place for storytellers.
mhm,
And it won't, I don't, it's not going to replace that entirely. So hold on to that and always inject your humanity into it.
mm.
That's
Yeah, technology will never be you, but it might be a part of you. It's already like an
yeah. I
extended
mean,
part of us, but, I don't
Neuralink, they
know.
kind of, they said it was going to be what, 10 years before someone was able to actually like use it. It took the guy 3 months to play chess.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm excited for I'm excited for it on like a productivity level. I think it's just going to be so amazing, and I think as long as you know how to use the technology, I think it's going to be phenomenal for so many careers as long as you're curious enough. But I am nervous for us like as a society like cuz somebody's going to abuse it, somebody's going to take it and this is what I'm worried about. We always ruin a good thing, us humans. We
Oh,
always ruin a good things.
it's like I was saying on well, actually, it's the next podcast we have coming out. I talked with a guy about this, and we were talking, and he was asking me where I am on it, and I was saying it's like everything else in human history. There'll be good things about it, and there'll be bad things about it. There'll be
Yeah.
places where we're going to go, we shouldn't have done that, and there's going to be places where you go, I can't believe that's possible. That's incredible. Like when I think about the possibilities in healthcare, it's incredible. Like
Mm.
how this will change things is going to be amazing. But you know, the day that an employer insists that you basically you need a Neuralink to get the job, and
Oh my
like
goodness.
or like don't worry, they'll pay for it, that kind of thing. It's like, oh, we're getting into Black Mirror territory now. This is
Yeah.
weird.
Goosebumps when you say stuff like that.
I know, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But is it possible? I mean, anything's
Yeah.
possible, right?
Now you just unlocked a different level of like anxiety for me about this stuff. I never even thought about like an employer asking for something, like, but I don't see it like as a, if they actually could, if they want you to be a little bit more smarter or
The
productive.
day I sell off all my assets and move into the mountains, I'm gonna live off the land.
Drop me the address, drop me the location, or maybe
Yeah.
don't send it on a piece of paper so nobody can find.
Start a co-op, we'll grow our own food. I don't know how we're gonna get by, figure it out.
I don't know either. It's
But I'm not
scary but
doing
exciting times.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Before I ask you my last question that I ask all of my guests, where can people get in touch with you? Where do you hang out at the most?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. There's I have a lot of contacts on there, so and I get a lot of messages through there, so I'm always on there. It's David Rice. Just you can put in like people managing people probably. Definitely check out our podcast because I'm always posting that on there. I'm on Twitter. Honestly can't remember the handle, but if you type in David people managing people, it should come up. And yeah, that's mostly where I hang out, like for professional stuff. Um, so yeah,
Nice.
feel free to
Um,
reach.
Sorry?
No, I was just saying, people should feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to make a new contact.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to share all of that in the show notes as well for people who are listening. Last question I ask all of my guests, and you kind of gave one away, and you can reuse it if you want to. You can give a new one. But what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
That's a good question. I think, why am I doing this? you know, Whatever it is, like in any moment, just ask yourself, because I think one of the biggest things that it has disrupted us, and like, it's kind of, I think people think it's like a cliche, to be in the moment, but if you look at like a lot of the great minds that we all look up to, or like people who have achieved things that you look up to, they have an uncanny ability to be in the moment, to give themselves to whatever it is that's happening around them, or to experience it essentially. So when I'm at the gas station and I'm completely unaware of everything that's around me, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, I'm at the gas station for what? What's around me? Like, constantly remind yourself of why you are where you are in a moment.
Mm,
And it's a good way of, for me, of saying, like, I know I start to notice things I never noticed before, or that I probably wouldn't have looked at that lady. And then actually, we just had like a nice little exchange, and it was pleasant.
yeah.
Like, it's a good way to stay connected to people. I always talking about the importance of building community. And like, I ask myself, like, why am I doing this? Is this in service of me building community somehow? Like, if I'm online and I'm just scrolling on my phone, I do it like just like everybody else. I'm just going through the 95th Instagram reel in a row. You know, why am I doing this? Is this serving me in some way other than to temporarily entertain my brain and sort of send me off in a spiral of short attention span, right?
Mm,
Or could I be messaging a friend and saying hi? Somebody that maybe that person lives alone, they need connection. Like, could I be checking on my mother and just seeing what's going on with her? She's got a partner who's sick. Could I just ask something that would maybe make her day a little bit better? So I could just share a photo, like a funny photo from way back with my
mhm,
and he'd go, "Oh God, I remember that." And you have a nice conversation. Always like come back like, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? Because
yeah.
we do tend to go into like zombie mode where you're just going through the motions of life, and you've got this supercomputer in your pocket now, and you can just pull it out anytime and distract yourself with the next thing. But for what? To what end? And how much have you lost contact with the people who are standing right next to you? So that's what I would say.
This was a very soulful and fulfilling conversation for me, David.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you
me
so
too.
much. I appreciate you. I appreciate the team and people managing people. I think it's one of the best collaborations I've ever done in terms of just how great the team is, how supportive you guys are, just the work that you guys are doing. It's just quality, good community, amazing content. So really kudos to you for kind of creating that. Really, it's a phenomenal piece to be a part of, and glad to get to meet you and learn about you a little bit on a different level. So,
Oh,
and I thank you for your time.
oh, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate the kudos on people managing people. It's been a lot of we do a lot of work, but a lot more to come, and we're excited about it. So.
Until next time.